Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. We're really excited to bring this topic to you. We are going to be talking to you today about the top 5 public safety trends of 2026. We've got a new report for you and some great people to share their insights. So we'll go ahead and click next and cover a couple of housekeeping items here for you. If you have any questions, please add them to the chat or to the question section inside of the webinar, and we will get to those at the end. Also, check your email for the webinar recording after the fact. We will be sending that out to you with supporting resources tomorrow. And then at the end, we would love to hear from you. If you would please take the survey. We'd love to hear your thoughts on how we did and what we can do better next time. All right, now I am going to turn it over to Chief JT to make some introductions to people who will be discussing this report with us. And I'm going to drop off and I will see you at the end for Q&A. Thanks so much again for joining.
Thanks, Alicia. Hey, everybody. I'm JT Monishagan, retired as a chief of police just a few months ago, spent 22 years on the job, the last 6 of which as a chief and also the executive director of a regional communication center. So really excited to bring this report to you alongside some incredible industry professionals. And so just going to get them introduced to you right now, a great cross section across a number of different disciplines. So with us today, we've got Deputy Chris Smith, Lieutenant Kevin Sims, and Comm Manager Amber Logan. You guys, would you mind just taking a couple minutes to let us know where you're from and the role you play in your department? Well, we'll start with you, Chris.
Sure. So I'm Deputy Chris Smith of the Limerick County Sheriff's Office. We're in Colorado, about an hour north of Denver. We go 2,500 square miles, go from everything from the plains and ultra urban to super rural up at the Continental Divide. So we quite a variety of space. And my role within the agency, I do a lot of our policy, manage all of our policy, a lot of compliance, stuff like that for the agency. So I spend a lot of time at a desk these days.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being with us. Lieutenant Sims.
Yes, good morning or good afternoon, depending on what time zone you're in. My name is Kevin Sims. I'm a lieutenant with the Seminole County Fire Department. Seminole County is located just north of the city of Orlando. I'm in my 31st year in the fire service, and I currently serve as the accreditation manager for my agency.
Awesome. Again, appreciate you being with us, LT. And last but not least, Amber.
Hello, my name is Amber Logan. I am the communications manager for Alamo Colleges here in San Antonio, Texas. And I've been in the business since 1997. I've done a little bit of everything from first responder in the field and now into the comm center.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So this workforce trends report set out to analyze the sentiments of nearly 2,000 respondents across the United States. And one of the things that we found is this thing called the readiness gap. So we asked a number of different questions, and what that does is it allows kind of the topics that are front of mind to boil up to the surface, and then for us to ask some questions around those to just better understand what it is that our men and women on the front lines are feeling. And this year, that trend or the analysis revealed this gap. And having just stepped out of public service myself, this felt spot on to me. I don't know about our other panelists, but what was so striking is that we have the solutions in place, but where we're lacking is in our ability to execute. Whether that is knowledge of how those systems work, whether it is manpower, in different institutional efficiencies, but the gap was clear. And so today we're going to unpack a number of those trends that create this gap and talk about what we may, as public safety professionals, be able to do about that. So like I mentioned, we had nearly 2,000 respondents on this survey. About 2/3 were law enforcement professionals, and they spanned in their roles within their departments in a number of different size departments and like I said, and roles. These are the top 5 things that we identified. Number 1, that workforce strain is structural. 2, that hiring friction limits recruiting. 3, efficiency depends on data and visibility. 4, AI adoption is outpacing our readiness for it. And then 5, change fails at execution. As you can see, all of these things are interrelated, and we'll talk about that more as we move through. So we'll begin here, and I would invite any one of our panelists that has insight that they would like to share here. But these things are not new to any of you serving in public safety right now. So maybe Chris or Kevin, talking about your agencies, your different parts of the country, would love to know how these factors are showing up in your departments.
Chris, you want to go first, or would you like me to go first?
Go for it. I have plenty of ideas, but they're actually on a couple of slides later.
I tell you, I would have to say that in my agency, and I believe we've discussed this previously, but staffing shortages are kind of a way of life right now and have always been. I can honestly say in my 30 years, I don't know that I've gone more than a week where we had that magical number of everybody we were supposed to have. So, I guess the key to that is learning how to be able to make the best use of the staff that you have available, with regards to the first one. And then the other one that I'm kind of keen with is the limited data visibility. I think that nowadays, in the age of technology, where there are so many different styles of mediums that are available for the presentation of data, sometimes people get sticker shock and forget that, the data doesn't have to be flashy in order to be effective. It just has to be correct. And I've gone to agencies for accreditation site visits where they are trying to use the newest and latest technology in dashboarding, and it didn't work out well because they weren't familiar with it. But then in conversations with the individual, I asked them, well, how good are you at Excel? And their answer is, oh, well, I'm very good at Excel. Well, then, stick with what you're good at while you're learning how to do this, flashy stuff. One of the analogies I always reminded them was, you can get from point A to point B in a Porsche, or you could get there in a Volkswagen. One might get you there faster and it might be a little flashier, but they're still going to get you to the same point. So that's just, those are one of the things, or two of the things that I've keyed in with on this, with the readiness gap.
Awesome. I appreciate that, and certainly look forward to hearing more of your insight as we move along. So let's dive into trend number 1, which is workforce strain and is structural. For too long now, we've lived under the pretense that one of these days we're going to be fully staffed. And it's like this carrot that dangles out in front of us, and we talk about it every year. If we do this, we do that, eventually we're going to be fully staffed. And what this survey reveals, and I think what the reality of public safety is right now, is that I just don't know that we're going to get there. I don't know that we are going to be back where we were 10 years ago in terms of number of FTEs. Through COVID and everything else, we've evolved. And so I think we're going to have to re-examine that, and the data certainly supports that. So Amber, I would love to know kind of how things are going in the comm center and what your take is on this. Like, are we ever going to be fully staffed again? Has the landscape really changed all that much?
I would have to say I don't know that we'll ever be fully staffed again in the comm center side of the world. It's something that's been happening even before this became a trend, so to speak. We look across a lot of these trends and we really see what it reflects on in communications every day. Staffing shortages has just become a baseline. It's not an exception. And that driving consistent workload pressure in our centers is also helping with that turnover. and that burnout. At the same time, while turnover is not always negative, we see an experience leaving the floor faster. A lot of communications personnel stay in this career field for 20, 30 years, and then they retire, and all that knowledge goes with them. People like me who started when it was pen and paper, and now we're seeing all this technology coming in that out surpasses them, and they feel like it's time for them to leave. But with that leaving, they take that knowledge with them. And so with these initiatives coming on board that we're trying to implement in the field, we also try to implement those here in the communication center as well. You know, wellness initiatives are absolutely important, and we've made some progress, but that doesn't solve everything. So when staffing is low, the systems are strained, the training and processes keep at that same pace, but we're not closing those gaps. And so from a communication side of point, I think it's a bigger issue of how do we sustain that workforce by being asked to do what we continue to do. Those calls are going to keep coming in, whether I have 20 people in the room or 5 people in the room. And the complexity of that environment is just what we have to keep going, because in order for us to serve those in the field, we have to make sure that we're maintaining some sort of balance. And so relying on full staffing may not be the way to do it. We just have to maintain the flow.
Yep. And you're so right. And with that turnover, rather than living with the expectation that one of these days it's going to get better, like let's just grin and bear it and we'll get through, that results in these very immature systems that support that, because we have this idea out on the horizon that, you know, when we get fully staffed, all of this will work the way that it's supposed to. And what this says is that because that's not going to happen, we need to reevaluate the systems and how we operate, how many people we're going to have on shift, and what level of service we're going to be able to provide, and readjust that to our new reality, rather than digging in and saying, no, if we just can get fully staffed, this will all be okay. We've gone on long enough and we're not seeing the kind of progress that we need. So that forces us to then look back at these other systems and maybe make some adjustments. So LT, I'd love to know over in the fire service how you guys are dealing with this. Retirement, you had mentioned the other day that being near a large municipality, that kind of creates an off-ramp for folks. Like, how are you guys dealing with this?
I mean, we try to do a very good job of forecasting, especially with regards to retirements and things like that. In Florida, we've got, especially with my agency, we're a part of the Florida retirement system. So if you enter what's known as the deferred retirement option plan or the drop plan, it's known that based on up to 5 or 8 years that you're going to be in this plan, that you cannot work another day after that. So that for the most part, that day is set in stone, that, you know, if you make it, that's your retirement date. So we do a pretty good job of trying to forecast for those anticipated departures. You know, succession planning is a huge thing that not a lot of people jump onto too often, especially with, you know, as many things that go on in all the different projects. Sometimes people have a tendency to try and silo things and keep them within as a like a security blanket, you know. And prior to the fire service, I was in the military, and one of the things that we were taught was, as soon as you achieve a certain rank, the first 2 things you should do is, number 1, learn the job of the person ahead of you, and number 2 is teach your job to the person below you. Because you never really know when the situation is going to arise where you're going to have to either step up or somebody else is going to have to step up. And that's something that we really need to focus on. And to go back to what you're saying about the the dream of perfect staffing, as I mentioned before, you know, for the most part, at the start of your shift, you're at full staffing. You know, whether it is 100%, 60%, 80%, 50%. Whatever it is, when that shift starts, you are now at full staffing. So at that point, you need to be able to look at what your goals are for that day and prioritize or triage your ability to do what you need to do for that period of time. And, you know, figure out, okay, where is my, you know, critical tasks? What are my important tasks? And divvy it down from there. And that's really just all you can do when you come to a situation like that. Yeah, because quite frankly, the public, you know, if things go sideways, you know, they're not going to be thrilled with that, even, and the fact that, well, we didn't have enough people, that's not going to be the right answer for them.
Yeah. So. And, you know, anytime you're talking about trends, it's hard to not have wellness emerge as a hot topic. And so, Deputy Smith, I'd love to know out in Colorado, how you guys are approaching wellness. The survey clearly reveals wellness is good. Like we want that, but it's not the golden ticket. It's not going to solve all of our problems, but it does help us start to move in a really positive direction.
Sure. And before I get started too about that, I like my agency. I like where I work. Um, the the command staff and all that kind of stuff is pretty supportive of everything. Those of us that are down on the line. Um, but when it really comes down to it, there's a lot of structural strain. I mean, everything from like we've been talking about so far, where we're short-staffed, and the staff that's here having to pick that up. But I can just remember a couple of times, in my career, like they changed the schedule on us, and my first thought is, well, this is not the schedule I signed up for. And again, don't get me wrong, I get it's a 24/7 occupation, and we got to be flexible with that. But one of the schedules changed so significantly at one point that it directly impacted my home life to a degree that it wasn't going to work. Fortunately, the agency caught on pretty quick that there were problems with this schedule, and we switched to something yet different. But even that still had strain, and some people quit over it. Fortunately, I was able to stay on, and things got better over time. But those are things we got to think about. And then pay is another big one too. There's a lot of people in this line of work that live paycheck to paycheck, and they look at that and they look at, well, the agency next door is paying an extra $6,000 a year now. $500 more a month goes a long way towards that car payment, things like that. So those are those structural things that are really having an impact. It's great when command staff gets out there and cooks us all lunch on the grill.
Yeah,
Those are fun things, but the structural stuff certainly matters.
you bet. And one of the things when I was looking at these cultural descriptors in the report, so kind of generally categorize them as like positive or negative. So supportive, that's positive. Negative, positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative, negative, or I'm sorry, positive, negative, negative. So, on first glance, there's a pretty even balance of positive descriptors of culture out there in the workplace and negative descriptors, top down. So it's good. We're definitely moving in the right direction. But you're right. The positive culture, if that is an environment that you're working in, as great as that is, there still can be structural, systematic things behind the scenes that may not be right. So that takes us into trend number 2, which is hiring friction. Anybody who is running a hiring process or has gone through a hiring process knows that there's a wide array of experiences that you can have with one of these processes. We are seeing some agencies across the country who've got this figured out. It's streamlined, it's smooth, it's a great experience for the applicant, but others are still doing these things on paper. It's bumpy. And when you look in competitive environments, there are agencies who are losing out on quality candidates because their process isn't moving as efficiently and quickly as it could. So, this revealed that in addition to those frictions, agencies are struggling to find those quality candidates. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not out there. It just means we're having a hard time finding them and attracting them to our agencies. So, there's always going to be a salary competition out there, especially in your major metropolitan areas. Everybody's going to be inching above, the next agency. But I feel like these last several years, we saw some really exponential increases, and that makes it very, very difficult. And it creates this wide gap between metro areas and rural areas. And I'm not sure about you guys, but here in the DFW Metroplex, it created a vacuum where these larger agencies paying high salaries started to pull candidates away from the smaller agencies. Well, guess what? That meant that the small agencies now had to facilitate hiring at a rate that they had not been accustomed to before because they're losing their personnel. So that means if those processes are not efficient, if they're friction ridden, it's going to have a propensity to drive these candidates to another agency that is more efficient. So I just found that really interesting. Now, the background process, that is a reality for all of us. And I'm just going to move through here. Chris, I know that, there are a lot of probably applicants that you guys are fielding out there between patrol and the jail and all of those kinds of things. Would love to know how you guys are navigating this process and if you found any efficiencies along the way.
Sure. I mean, a lot of the applicants that are applying in this kind of work, I mean, there's agencies all over the place. We have a lot of neighboring great agencies. And the first one that's going to offer them a position, and especially the first one that's going to offer them a start date, is likely going to get that applicant. So getting them through those processes as quick as possible. We've streamlined our background process. We use Vetted, a NeoGov product, for that, to help streamline that process. We've looked at a lot of different ways to streamline everything. Are there things that we can do at the same time? Can we start them on we're filling out the personal history statement, while they're working on something else, just to streamline that whole process in the hiring. I'm only involved in the background part of it. But then also something that we've done as an agency is instead of making everybody wait until the group hire date when the academy starts, if we really want somebody and really want them to work here, is there some way we can hire them now and get them doing, we're short staffed. Are there other places that we can use them for a couple of weeks to do different things while we wait for that academy class to start? So they're already here, they're already getting to know the agency, and we kind of lock them up here, even though the academy doesn't start for a little while longer.
Yeah, that we're in a vulnerable time when we've got those candidates in the process because they're not fully committed yet. We run the risk of losing them. So I think that is an edge that you have when you create an opportunity for them to come on board while still moving through that process. I think that's great. Okay, moving on to trend 3. This is where I would really like to hear from Amber on, kind of what you think here. So because we know that we're likely never going to be fully staffed again, growing, like increasing our FTEs and all that, now we have to shift to efficiency. So looking at our different systems, the service expectations of our communities. All right, if we're not going to get more people, then we got to figure out how to do this better. How can we optimize what we're doing? So, Amber, any thoughts here or anything that you've discovered here?
Well, from a communications perspective, this trend really highlights how critical data and the visibility have become. Many agencies are just trying to move from just responding to calls to actually improving that performance, but that's difficult when you have systems like CAD or RMS or phone systems that aren't fully connected. So, for example, we might see an increase in call volume or longer call times, but without clear data to show why, whether it's staffing or call complexity or progress gaps, it's hard for us to make that meaningful change. So in communication centers, we're collecting a lot of information, but without that right visibility, we can't always turn that into a better decision. So improving efficiency isn't just about having the data, it's about having clear, unusable data that supports both real-time operation and long-term improvement.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. One of the things that I have realized since coming over to NeoGov is how many agencies across the country are still using paper. I've probably been on hundreds of calls now, and in fact, I recently wrote an article about this. just how shocked I was. It's not wrong. If systems work, it makes sense that people would continue to use them, but they do create some inefficiencies that when you're struggling to be fully staffed, that may just be the time that you have to re-examine those processes of paper and say, you know what, maybe a digital solution is going to be the thing that we need to help us move forward here. So LT, have you seen this either in your department or as you're out doing assessments, kind of this switch from paper to digital solutions?
Most definitely. And you're right. There are quite a few agencies that still do that. It's as you were saying, with efficiency, there's a difference between doing the job right and doing the right job. You could be doing things wonderfully, but if it's not meeting the goals for what you need, then you're not really accomplishing much. And as I say, when the last agency I went to where they had the issue, I finally had to tell the individual, absolutely, if you want to start getting into the more digital things, then by all means do it, but don't use it as the be all and end all until you reach a certain level of capability and trust in your own belief in that system, so that it doesn't become detrimental to what it is you're actually trying to accomplish. As I told the individual, if you're very good at Excel, use Excel for your reportable data while you learn how to do these new things, because as you're learning to use these new products, a lot of them still in one way or another rely on spreadsheets and things like that in the background. So you can use it as a QA function to be able to understand, as I told the individual last time, if you're the only person working on a brand new digital platform, I can guarantee you that you think that 99% of what you're doing is right because you're the only person looking at it. So you want to have that stuff in the background to be able to use it as some form of a QA program, so that if you do something on a new digital program and it gives you a number of X and you're very familiar with Excel and it's telling you it's Y, well, now you understand, okay, I need to start looking at something and figuring out how the system works and making sure that backtracking to figure out where your problem was, so that you're not presenting the wrong data to important people, which is entirely possible.
Yeah.
It's, as I said, there's, as I explained to him before, too many times agencies get worried about what they consider to be ugly data. It makes us look bad. Well, no, that doesn't make you look bad. That just shows you where you are, and it gives you a basis for improvement. Nobody's going to make anything better if you put on those rose-colored glasses and you make everybody think that everything looks wonderful. You have to have that. You have to have that level where you can say, "Yep, this is how we're doing. It doesn't look great, but here's our plan to fix things." And
Yeah,
that's
it
what
does
kind of goes.
a
Sorry,
lot.
go ahead.
No,
Yeah.
I'm just saying it does reveal a lot. Um, and while there are some agencies who are still relying on paper, one of the things in those hundreds of meetings that I've seen is the complete opposite end of the spectrum. Perhaps you could call it the over reliance on technology. And we've seen that agencies recognize technology can be very helpful. And so they implement everything. And then they get all of these disparate systems that don't talk to each other. They've got to log in an invoice and things that work over in this system, but it doesn't talk to this one or doesn't talk to this one. And I've got to ask, are we any better off than when we were on paper by doing that? It seems that it would make the most sense when those things talk.
No, absolutely. It has to be able to talk to, like, for example, at my department, we have a system administrator, and basically any new products that we want to buy, they have to go through him because he understands the language. He knows what it's compatible with. And too often you can get different divisions within a department wanting to buy a product that they think suits their needs, but it might only suit their needs. And next thing you know, you have intercommunications issues. With us right now, we're trying to integrate pre-fire planning and our inspections into our CAD, and we're finding out that while the products that we bought looked shiny and they work for that particular function, there's not necessarily always that intercommunication between the groups, so that, you know, if the crews are out doing pre-fire plans or our inspectors are out doing inspections, we don't need that duplication of effort. You start talking about efficiency once again. You know, you shouldn't have a crew go out and start doing the exact same thing that the inspectors are already doing, as far as getting contact information, looking for target hazards, things like that, if it's already been done. So you need to make sure you've got some form of a, like a gatekeeper, so to speak, you know, to be able to ensure that you buy not just the right product, but the right product that works as a whole with all of the others.
Yeah. So Chris, earlier you were talking about using vetted and using it for your hiring process. And you shared something interesting about how the data kind of created some visibility on the problem that you guys didn't really expect, or I guess some people didn't expect. Can you tell us
Sure.
about
I mean, they've always blamed backgrounds as the bottleneck in our systems and our hiring process and things like that. Even though those of us that did backgrounds were always arguing that that's not us, that we're not causing the problems. Vetted is actually able to show a lot of that data and a lot of where the problems weren't. It's difficult to use, you know, a system that's designed for backgrounds and say, well, our problem is over here, or our problem is over here, but it was able to show that, well, our problem is not in backgrounds. It's in other places. The interesting thing you mentioned a bit ago too about, you know, if you have a system that works with the paper processes, one of the issues that we kind of went through when we were looking at implementing something other than paper, those who've been in the process for so long were pushing back and saying, you know, don't fix what's not broke, don't fix what's not broke. I'm like, it is broke, it is broke. And here's all the different reasons, everything from the investigator to the applicant to the people, the references and all these other kind of things, all these different systems and ways we're managing this isn't working. You know, Vetted's was able to bring that together for us into one place. So while many of our people were sitting there, you know, telling me it's not broke, and here I am pushing, it is broke, guys, and here's all the different reasons why. The nice thing also, like Lieutenant's mentioning as well, is we did keep a few of those systems in the background, an Excel spreadsheet, to make sure that what we were getting and the way things were being tracked still made sense in Vetted.
Got it. And Amber, I'm curious, these top areas where agencies want data, is that what you're seeing down around the San Antonio area?
But for the most part, most of our agencies are pretty digital. We got some smaller agencies maybe that are still paper, but for my general area where I'm at, most of them are pretty digital now. They've all gone to some sort of platform or program that is talking to each other. I'm fortunate enough that our cog kind of keeps us all together. So if one person gets something, the other one's kind of like, I want it too, and then we kind of try to share.
Yeah, and I think as we look to optimize, so doing more with less, really increasing the efficiency, what do we want from data? We've got CAD that produces data. We've got background systems. We've got policy management tools. Like everything has a dashboard. And if you look at those things, sometimes it's data overload. Like I have so much stuff available. And if you're operating in one of those disparate environments, like how do I even begin to start making sense of all this? Because the volume is so high. And it was really the one thing I love about these surveys is it puts words to things that we feel, but maybe we're not able to put our finger on. You know, brings those trends to the surface. So, you know, people in the field, chiefs, officers, everybody, They know and understand the value of the data. And what they want is for the data to help them see around corners, see over the horizon, so that they can solve problems before they're problems and not just reflect on them after something's happened. You know, we can all pull reports and Monday morning quarterback after something goes wrong, but there's a lot of value in these things that can kind of help see ahead. And that's what it seems like everybody's asking for. So we'll move now into what is probably the hottest topic across all industries right now, and that is AI. There is no doubt that AI is being used in public safety in a number of ways, whether it's sanctioned through policy or not. It's kind of off on the side, and therein lies the problem. From the survey, we found out that about 25% of people are using AI on an individual basis, but not necessarily from an enterprise level across their organization. So I would love to push it back on you guys and ask, how are your agencies using AI to relieve some of that pressure? I mean, if the goal is to optimize and do more with less, then AI seems like a really great tool to be able to do that. The question then becomes how? How do we do that? And in what ways do we trust AI to come alongside of us, and where do we keep it out?
I'd love to speak to this just because
Please.
I've adopted and run with AI, whether it's my personal life and planning a vacation, to how can I use this at work to get more done and be more efficient. When we were talking about this the other day, and I read that line, adoption is often driven by individual employees. I mean, to me, that screams truth. Um, I saw opportunities, saw ways we could potentially increase productivity, started in backgrounds. A lot of the stuff that they've been adopting in AI or in embedded with AI, I found other ways to do outside of AI, whether it was or outside of vetted, whether it's summarizing interviews, helping me write reports, or I have a whole big long interview I just did with this applicant. You know, how can I summarize that in something compact and make sense without me having to go through line by line and re-listen to the audio? Um, so different ways I could do better and do faster. I manage all of our agency's policy. Um, I would get asked, "Hey, what does our policy say about this? Hey, what does our policy say about that?" I've used AI to bundle it all into a one particular place, and created a way for them to go type in their question. AI will only look at our policy to answer that question. Or not too long ago, the sheriff asked me, he's like, "Hey, what is our, I want to know every intersection this topic has with our policy." When I heard intersection, I'm thinking he wants to know every last little tiny piece that may or may not. And so using that same system, hey, how do I, where are these things intersecting and in what way? And what would have taken me hours and hours and hours to do, AI did in mere like less than a minute. I actually had to sit there and watch the wheel turn, but it actually thought about it, something that would take me so long to do. But out of that, because I also manage policy and I'm a policy geek, I'm like, man, I really need to have policy behind what I'm doing. And I don't know that many people that are doing this in the background, the agency doesn't necessarily know about, also have that same mindset like I do. Um, so I started drafting policy to, put those safeguards in place. We require a human in the loop. So before anything becomes any sort of work product, it has to be reviewed. And we put statements in our stuff that say, this has been reviewed by a human. Ultimately, I'm responsible for everything that gets put out, whether I used AI for it or whether I did it myself. I am responsible, and the agency says I'm responsible for that. So those kind of things, safeguards that we've started putting in to make sure that things are checked, things are looked at, and we also look at the level of what the output is. Right, we're not doing this for criminal reports or things like that. We're doing this for administrative tasks. There are new products out there and I know they exist. It doesn't mean we're not looking into them. That'll summarize for criminal reports and things like that off your body cam. Great stuff. There again, still having that human in the loop. It's not final work product by any stretch of imagination, just like a regular case report isn't until it's been reviewed by the writing deputy and their supervisor.
Yeah.
And double checking all that output.
One of the things that's so cool, not only about this report that was multidisciplinary, but about this panel, is that we have representation from all different portions of public safety. So love your law enforcement perspective on how it can be used, leveraged to kind of help us close up some of these gaps. But Amber, in my time as an executive director over at Comm Center, the amount of AI coming in to telecommunications, emergency communications, I mean, you want to talk about a new frontier.
Right.
There is just so much out there. What are you guys, have you found any hacks or any optimizations in AI?
Well, I mean, AI is wonderful for personal use, I believe. And you know, if you're a college student, you rely on it, and they even make you put a statement in your paper, right, that you used AI. So from these trends highlighting both the opportunity, it also highlights the risk of the adoption of AI. And although it does reduce some workload, and that's kind of the push for communications, you know, use AI to reduce workload and help with call triage and automating entry and all that, it also introduces a new responsibility for oversight and compliance. So, for example, if AI is used to capture or process call information, then we still have to ensure that criminal justice information is handled within full compliance of CJIS requirements. So now, how is that data being stored, accessed, and protected, right? So we have that extra layer that we have to worry about. So in communications, the question isn't, can AI help us? It's, can it help us and still stay compliant with CJIS regulations and FBI regulations and things like that. So because we now have this AI adoption that's being basically pushed through all these comm centers, we have to wonder about that risk that comes with it. So is it helpful? Yes, but where's the risk and who's oversighting that risk? So I'm all for AI in the sense that you can use it for your personal side and policy and things like that. But we have to have accountability, judgment, and compliance standards in place in all comm centers that are going to utilize AI.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think the key to the door is policy, are those guardrails. You know, we have to start there. The area that fascinated me in the comm center was our quality assurance programs. So feeding the calls, the call recordings, the radio traffic, the CAD notes, everything feeds in there. And we went from being able to QA like 1% of our calls to 100%. So the believability of the data that we were getting went from like, I think it's a fair representation, but we're just not able to get to very much. And so I don't know if it's a true reflection to, dang, we're scoring like 95, 98% on our QAs. We really are doing a great job. But like Chris said, there's always got to be a human in the loop. So these are preliminary analysis that's done. And then our supervisors and leaders are coming in and verifying that those things are correct. But I just think about how much time it used to take to do that manually, and some inconsistency across members of our team. And now we have consistency, we have efficiency, and seems like a really cool thing. But great point that we've got to figure out what those checks and balances and guardrails are to keep it in check and not compromise the data. Now, LT, over on the fire side, you represent that other very important discipline here at the table. How are you using AI over on the fire side?
It is something that we use judiciously, but cautiously.
Okay.
As I was, you were mentioning before, talking about needing policy to implement this. Well, at the same time, it can't just be policy. You have to also have some good communication with your field personnel so that they understand the whys behind, the teeth of that policy. Why are you or are you not allowed to do certain things? Because as somebody told me one day, if you don't teach your crews how to use AI, they'll learn themselves, and you might get the good, you might get the bad. With great power comes great responsibility. You got to be really careful of that. And just like you guys with CGIS, we have to be very cognizant of HIPAA guidelines.
Yeah.
And you have to be very careful. There are a lot of aspects of AI that are very beneficial to what we do now, especially with regards to our report writing. Some of the products we're using now have the ability to take, pictures of an entire counter full of medications and recognize, the ones that belong to your patient and put them in the report in the correct way and things like that. But as Chris said, at the same time, you still have to have, a human there, to trust but verify. A lot of these reports are going off of validities, and if you put something in a box and it considers it filled, then it says, okay, your validity is good, but it might not be the right information. All it's seeing is X's and O's. So, like I say, you have to, have that policy plus communication plus training so that everybody has a good understanding. Don't implement a new AI portion to a program and just let it float out there and have people figure out how to do it for themselves. Have people learn how to do that before, become super users, have people that, people, if they got questions, they can go to ask these questions and things like that. That's where, it really comes into play with AI. It can be a tremendous asset, but at the same time, you don't want it to become a liability. So you just have to weigh the pros and cons of it.
Yeah. And I'd be curious to know if you guys agree. The way that I view public safety and I don't think AI is ever going to respond to a domestic dispute. I don't think AI is ever going to go make an arrest. I don't think AI is ever going to roll up on a fire and start putting it out. And I don't think AI is going to be on the other end of a 911 call, making judgments, and talking with compassion and giving CPR instructions or delivering a baby. Like, I just don't think that's the role it's going to play. But this is what I see. All too often, we have police officers, badge, gun, firefighters, dispatchers doing jobs that they were never trained to do. You don't go to the police academy, qualify with a weapon, do defensive tactics to work on spreadsheets. That maybe that's a skill that you had when you came into the profession, or you found yourself in an administrative position that was the best way you could keep up with the other duties as assigned that came your way. And so that is the area, the pieces and parts of our jobs that we didn't necessarily sign up for, but we understand that it's important for the function of our agency or our center or our department. That's the area where I think we can really leverage AI. And I'd be curious to know whether you agree with that or not, and if that's something that you have seen.
If you think about it, law enforcement's been adapting since day one. You look at old school with a B cop walking around with a baton in his hand, walking around downtown. So now all of the different things that an officer or a deputy responds to and is responsible for and does, it's been constantly evolving, and I just see it continuing to evolve. A neighboring agency uses drones as a community resource. That's what they call them. Where call comes in, they can send that drone out, gets there first, and it's like, hey, what is really the problem? Things like that. That's already happening. So do I never think that some sort of artificial intelligence won't answer the call or won't make an arrest? I don't know. Things have come a long way in the last few years. I kind of start to wonder. But kind of on that oversight thing, I don't want anybody to think for half a second that we're putting anything in AI that's not protected. We're not even, that's part of our policy is, and those of us that are starting to use it are very careful about what we're putting in. and reviewing what is coming out before anything crazy happens.
And that's an important distinction, is the difference between open and closed AI.
And
You know,
right, and that's actually just where I was going. When we were still using the quote unquote free models and things like that, I mean, I was showing people how do you set it so that it's not using these things to train models, and that information is being kept more secure. Not saying secure, more secure. And then the county, I feel very fortunate to work for a very forward-thinking county agency. They've actually purchased an enterprise level, and in that enterprise agreement is contracts to keep that data within our domain and safe. Even though we're still not putting a lot of that stuff that needs that super level of protection like CGIS data in there, we're still keeping that out of it. But our data is even more secure than it was before.
and I think here at NeoGov, like we understand that AI is not just a nice to have anymore. That in a lot of ways, it's an expectation that people have, that the softwares that they're using have some sort of integrated AI technology, whether it's simple summarization or search features or what have you. And as we begin or continue integrating AI into what we're doing, we're starting to see feedback come in from our customers, and they appreciate the fact that these things are closed, that the AI that is embedded in our technology is not training other models like you recommend or you mentioned, and also that it has the ability to toggle on and off. So if the policy of your agency does not allow for AI to be used, you can toggle it off, remain in compliance, and then whenever you're ready, you can um, you can toggle it back on, and off you go. All right, so great discussion there on AI. Um, just for the sake of time, we're going to push forward here to trend number 5, and that is that change fails at execution. Um, it is no surprise that we're really good at doing the operational things. We're really good at patrolling, discovering crime, responding to calls, answering 911 calls, putting out fires. That's why we all join our respective professions to do what we're doing. Unfortunately, that is generally not where the failures occur. It's occurring on the back end, on that administrative area where we really need those optimizations. In the survey, we found that less than a third felt very prepared to manage the changes that were coming. The vast majority, 2/3, more than 2/3, said that they are not prepared to handle those things. And many are implementing changes because they have to. The demand for optimization and efficiency requires that they do something, but often that something happens so fast that once it's up and running, they don't know how to continue to manage it. So Amber, I would love to know like how you guys are navigating that. Any of these systems that you're implementing, and knowing that we're never going to be fully staffed, like how are you ensuring that they're still successful?
Well, workforce issues like staffing shortages, burnout, and retention are always recognized, but operational constraints, misalignment, those just slow down that meaningful change. So in centers like where staffing models need to be changed, or training or technology, those just come to compete with our daily demands. So we try to keep the operations running, but we task things out. Certain people are tasked certain things to focus on so that it doesn't become a burden to everybody. That becomes their one priority. It's kind of like that's my secret little thing I'm dealing with, and they take more pride in it. And then we come together as a group, and we say, okay, what are some things that you've talked about, how we can make these changes and how we can make them efficient and how we can put them into play so that they'll actually implement and stick. And I find that that tends to work because we all know in everyday life, there's a lot of change that needs to be made. But in a comm center, when we're going into E911, we're going into all these different things. Every time I read a new journal, there's like 80 million things I'm supposed to implement, right? And so what I do is I task it out to my people, and it makes them have some ownership of it. And then we just sit down and we talk to it about as a group. And then I teach them how to do the proposal for it or whatever it needs to be. And then that makes them take ownership of it. And I think ownership is a big part of that change management. If they don't feel they have any ownership in the change, they're going to give you a little resistance. And so that's where I think in comm centers, when you get your people from being I'm just a frontline dispatcher, nobody cares what I think. No, let's bring them to the table and let them make those decisions. It really kind of impacts that change, and it makes them feel like they have an influence in what's happening in their own center. They're not just coming to work to hitting the clock and then going home. Everything that they do is now impacted by them, but they feel like they had input.
Yeah,
If that makes
no
sense.
doubt. And as we bring this thing home, LT, I would love to hear from you here, but this whole readiness gap that we've been talking about, it doesn't represent just one single thing. And although the report pulls out 5 trends, there's a lot more to this. So it's systemic. We got a lot of things that we're dealing with, not just one thing. So knowing that it's all interconnected, where do we start?
I would say that the best place to start is honest and open communication, both with your internal and your external stakeholders. Find out from your public what it is they want from your agency. What are the high priorities? What are the low priorities? Find out from your internal stakeholders, your personnel. What do they think they are? Communication between both agencies or both entities, you want to be going in the right direction as an agency. And that way you don't, like, as I said before, it's not so much doing the job right, it's doing the right job. Having strategic planning, understanding where you're wanting to be 5 years from now, so that as you begin working with these things and you start to encounter change, those changes might not hit quite so hard, if you saw them coming a little farther in advance or were possibly prepared for that possibility. And strategic planning also incorporates from the top to the bottom so that everybody understands not just the what it is that you're doing, but the why. Why are we doing this? So, and that, as I was going to say from the last one, sometimes you're talking about some of these changes. If you want to make a fireman or police officer mad, give them a task to fill a bucket with something, and then when it's done, tell them to empty it, and don't give them any reason why they're doing what they're doing and what they're trying to accomplish. Well, you start doing that, and the person's going to feel like whatever it is they're doing is not part of a bigger picture. Having them understand the vision, of what it is you're trying to accomplish. As Patton said, don't tell people, how to do things. Tell them what to do and let them surprise you with their ingenuity. That's in my mind, vision and communication and planning. That's how you work through these things.
Totally agree. Okay, so that kind of brings us to the end here. And just wanted to remind those of you in the audience about all these different resources that are out here. I would really encourage you to download this full report. It is incredible. In this hour, we have just scratched the surface. There is so much to this. And as a data nerd myself, I can't wait to get into this further. Obviously, this webinar is recorded. Please, you can come back and watch it to dig deeper into what we have shared. You can share it with colleagues, use it as a conversation starter within your agency. We would love that. Thank you all for your time and your attention. Alicia, I will kick it over to you here to round this thing out.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for everyone for participating. Excellent panel. So good to hear from all of the different disciplines. We don't have any questions. You'll cover this so thoroughly. I really appreciate it. If anyone thinks of questions as you're kind of mulling this over, as you dive into the deeper report, please feel free to reach out to any of our representatives here at Power DMS by NeoGov. We would love to help answer questions about what's going on in the marketplace right now, what's going on in industries, and how we can help you potentially solve any of those problems. We are here for you. Thank you so much again for tuning in and joining us for our webinar, and we hope you all have a fantastic and safe day. Thank you so much.